On a stormy night in 1954, a blood-curdling scream echoed throughout the halls of the Hotel del Salto. A guest was found brutally unalived in her room, her lifeless body sprawled across the floor, eyes wide open in terror. The gruesome scene was just one of the many that left an indelible mark on the hotel's already dark reputation. 1920s Colombia. The air filled with a cautious optimism. After a long and turbulent 19th century, having just broken free from the grip of the Spanish colonial rule, the fledgling nation struggled to define itself. But largely thanks to the rich, dark beans that grew on its mountainous slopes, the nation was beginning to find its footing. Coffee, brown gold. Imagine the bustling ports where sacks overflowing with this precious commodity were loaded onto ships bound for Europe and North America. Coffee was the lifeblood of Colombia's economy, bringing in much-needed foreign currency that was fueling the dreams of progress. The rhythmic clang of hammers and the hiss of steam as railway lines snaked their way through the valleys and over the mountains, aiming to link the coffee-growing regions with the coasts. These weren't just tracks. They were arteries of a developing nation, carrying not just goods, but also the hopes of a more integrated future. While the aroma of progress filled the air in bustling urban centers, the heart of Colombia remained deeply rural. The majority of its people lived a life tied to the land, their days dictated by the seasons and the harvests. Yet, even in these quieter corners, the whispers of change were beginning to be heard. The construction projects in the cities drew in people seeking new opportunities, and with them came the early stirrings of a working class beginning to find a collective voice and opportunity. It was within this dynamic, evolving Colombia, a nation riding the wave of a coffee boom, investing in its future, and navigating the currents of tradition and modernity, that the first stones of what would become the Hotel del Salto were laid by its founder, Carlos Arturo Lopez, in 1923. Initially, Del Salto was being built as a private mansion for its owner, a place where the affluent could gather and celebrate their status, with the stunning Tequendama Falls as a backdrop. The structure was initially conceived as a luxurious retreat for the wealthy. It wasn't until 1928 that it officially became the Hotel del Salto, a beacon of opulence that drew Colombia's elite for the next 6 decades, eager to indulge in the breathtaking views and lavish accommodations. What began as a symbol of grandeur and opulence slowly turned into a ghostly shadow of its former glory. The once vibrant hotspot, where champagne flowed beneath glittering chandeliers and laughter echoed through the halls, became a stage for tragedy. As the years passed, the hotel's reputation took a sinister turn. A wave of people unaliving themselves, as well as inexplicable events, began to plague the once glamorous establishment. Among the whispers of ghostly apparitions, the hotel patrons began throwing themselves from the windows of the hotel. Perhaps they were fueled by despair, mental anguish, or even the hotel's increasingly isolated and unsettling atmosphere. Fleeting figures in the darkened corridors and disembodied moans became commonplace among both visitors and staff. Occurrences that could be attributed to the building's age, echoing acoustics, and the power of suggestion in a place already steeped in tragedy. And the homicides? Who can forget those? The hotel's decline fueled the growing tales of hauntings, paranormal activity, and death. Today, the Hotel del Salto stands as a decaying monument to its sorrowful past, a magnet for curious onlookers and paranormal investigators alike, all drawn by the promise of uncovering the secrets clinging to its historical walls. In the moments to come, we will attempt to uncover some of those secrets buried by the sands of time, discovering some of the truths behind this real-life tragedy that is the Hotel del Salto. The very name, Hotel del Salto, literally translated, means Hotel of the Leap, or Hotel of the Fall. Both translations send a shiver down the spine. Also known as the Suicide Hotel, Del Salto is perched on a cliff with the roaring Tequendama Falls below. It stands as a monument to a past filled with luxury and hidden pain. Lore tells us that the native Muisca peoples would leap off of the nearby falls in a desperate act of defiance against the Spanish forces who began to conquer South America in the 1500s. The story goes that rather than meeting their demise at the bottom of the falls, the Muisca would transform midair into eagles and soar off into the skies, unscathed by their attackers. But a darker narrative also persists. Others whisper that those who plunged from the grasp of the Spanish met a grim end in the harrowing waters below, their spirits trapped in perpetual limbo within the fall's misty embrace. And it is these very tormented souls, some believe, that were responsible for the subsequent wave of people who sought release within the walls of Del Salto, their despair echoing through the living. Locals often speak in hushed tones of the restless spirits that wander the hotel's decaying halls, and of tragic lovers who chose the fatal leap, their souls forever entwined with the mist of the falls. They speak of a dark presence that feeds on the sorrow of those who dare to stay within its haunted confines. Long ago, before the shadows crept in, Del Salto was a symbol of luxury, attracting the wealthy and elite from every corner of the globe. Grand parties were held beneath the dazzling light of its chandeliers, the clinking of champagne flutes and bursts of laughter filling the air. But it wasn't long before the joyful facade began to crack, revealing a darker undercurrent within this magnificent haven. Rumors of those who chose to depart, as well as accidental deaths, began to emerge. Guests reported strange happenings like cold spots of air, disembodied voices, and fleeting glimpses of ghostly figures in the halls, each whisper chipping away at the hotel's once glittering reputation. One particular story has stood the test of time. It tells of a woman, her heart shattered by a failed romance, who sought a final, desperate escape. She leaped from her room's balcony, her body disappearing into the churning depths of the falls below. Some say her sorrowful cries can still be heard on stormy nights, carried by the wind. The weight of these lost lives, these abrupt and tragic ends, echo through time, clinging to the very stones of the hotel. Over the years, the allure of the Hotel del Salto waned. Tourism dwindled, exacerbated by the increasing tide of trash, human waste, and industrial pollution that choked the Bogota River. The once majestic Tequendama Falls, the hotel's dramatic backdrop, became the city's primary sewer, earning the grim title of the world's largest wastewater falls. Before its eventual closure in 1990, the unbearable stench alone was enough to deter any discerning guest that wasn't initially scared off by the hotel's scary reputation. While the structure still stands today, it no longer functions as a hotel. In 2011, it underwent restoration and was transformed into a museum by the National University of Colombia. Unfortunately, much like the lives tragically cut short within its walls, the hotel, too, has been deemed a casualty. Although having been restored, much of the work involved a complete abandonment of the original interior decor, replaced by a sterile, modern white plaster finish, leaving the building's interior a far cry of its former self. The outside of the building now whitewashed, eliminating the original beauty and character of this historic monument. But no amount of paint will ever be able to hide the bloodstains and horror that once defined the Hotel del Salto. The stones themselves remember, and if we listen closely to the whispers carried on the wind from the falls below, perhaps we too might understand the tragedy that defines this tormented past. It's a history ripe for interpretation, where genuine tragedy could easily spark stories of the supernatural, the human psyche often finding patterns and explanations in the shadows of grief and despair. And so, the whispers persist. Are they the cries of tormented spirits clinging to this crumbling place, or merely the echoes of human suffering, magnified by the weight of sorrow that permeates the very stones of the Hotel del Salto? The line blurs, leaving us to wonder where the real hauntings truly lie, in the realm beyond or within the depths of the human psyche.